things started tonight. Welcome, everyone. My name is Heather Nickerson, co-founder and CEO of Artifacts. I'm joined with my co-founder, Ellen Goodwin, and also our special guest, Matt Paxton, tonight to talk about all things legacy and to do an interactive workshop with all of you tonight to help you get started on how do you tell your story? How do you share and build your legacy one object at a time? So with that, we're going to jump right into a bit of a discussion with our guest tonight, Matt Paxton. He's going to share a bit about his work on PBS Legacy List, what legacy means to him, and then also we'll share some of his favorite artifacts that highlight his legacy. We're jumping into the hands-on part of the workshop tonight. So welcome, Matt. We're thrilled you're here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we'd like to jump right in and hear from you. You're essentially an expert on legacy. You help families build, preserve, and share their legacy. But that word can be a really tough word for some folks. There's a lot that goes into legacy. And to you, what is legacy? What does it mean to you?
Oh, I love that question. For me, so if you don't know who I am, I was on that show Hoarders for 15 years. But my real business is just helping people clean out their houses. So I do a lot of downsizing, estate clean outs, and legacy has become a really big part of that. And so I really dumb it down to one simple sentence: is how do you want to be remembered, or what do you want to be remembered? A lot of my clients, let's frame it. Most of my clients are over 75 and they've had a wonderful life and they want to share those memories with their family members that are still with them, or they want their stories to live on after they're gone. For me, if you know me, my dad is probably my biggest legacy. My dad died when he was 52, and I'll be 50 this year, by the way, folks. So that as I get closer to that number, that word legacy becomes even more important to me. And as
You do
I
not look 50, Matt, just
thank
saying.
you, I'll take it. Thank you. Is it 60? It's the number. How do I want to be remembered? Like, what do I want to be remembered for? And that could be through work, through family, through parenting, through stuff, whatever it is. But for me in my world, um, it always shows up in people's stuff. And it's really the stories, right? Like they say, oh gosh, it's the stories, I've got this item from my grandpa. And so they attach that legacy to an item. And obviously, that's why I use artifacts, because it's a great way for me to actually record those stories. But if you really get into the definition of legacy, for me, it is how do I want to be remembered, or what do I want to be remembered, and what is the story attached to that? And there's a lot
And
of ways
speaking of
to
those
break it
stories,
down.
Matt, like
Yeah.
like on the story front, let's dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like for you, when you're helping families tell their story, or when you're thinking about your own story, what components have to be there in that storytelling piece? Like
Ooh.
what makes it a good story as
So
far
I
as
learned this is not Heather wrote this many years ago, not me, but I stole it from Artifact when I worked with them. Um, Stories do not have to be perfect. And I just, if that's the only thing you learn tonight, I'm okay with that. Um, and the other thing I stole from you guys is memories create more memories. And I cannot stress that. Anyone that is, I stole that from one of Heather's presentations. And it's so true. And the more I use artifacts, the more I realize that we come from a generation of like perfection, right? If you're over 50, you were academically trained to be perfect. That's how we were raised. And it doesn't need to be that way. A lot of us are, I found a lot of my clients miss out on the storytelling because they don't remember everything. And so it's just start with what you remember. I mean, wh who was there? What was the weather? I mean, anything. Like, why did it make you feel important? Like, always, when I tell stories about my dad, I mean, I always try to say, like, well, he made me feel like, like I mattered, or it made me feel like I was important. It made me feel like I had value. And I start with that. And then, so I start with a feeling, not necessarily a full blown story, and but it starts the beginning. A legacy is not a perfect story wrapped in a bow. That's just not it. A legacy is going to grow over time, and as you grieve, it's going to be up and down, and as you celebrate, it's going to be up and down. And I mean, I find myself. It's funny now that I use artifacts more in my career. I find myself going back and changing things in my artifact and like adding things and pulling things back because the stories evolve with time. I mean, my dad has been gone longer than he was alive in my life, and so I started artifacting about my dad. I started creating my dad's legacy as a grieving son. And now when I talk about legacy, I'm a proud father of six boys and one girl, and so my story in that legacy, even attached to an item or to anything, changes because we evolve as people, right? And so I don't want to get you know, too deep here, but like I never want someone to think a legacy is just stagnant and it's it's not lost in that moment of time. That current legacy is this moment of time and that current memory is, but it's going to change. It's going to change over time and that's okay. That means you're living and progressing, I think. So it's a good thing.
Matt, it's an interesting point because I told people I went to actually publish my first set of artifacts to a book with our partner
Yeah.
Akin, and I selected the artifacts, and I was like, wait a minute. I went back and I was like, wait, I have to revise all these. And it's interesting because,
Mhm.
over the even just the course of 3 years of having artifacted them, I was like, what mood was I in when I wrote those? And if I'm putting them in a book and it's going to be on my coffee table, so I actually created doubles of some of them where it's like a very personal version versus like the more public version. So it's interesting because I found
Yeah.
moods even changing and the details I wanted to share.
As a father, I have a lot of legacy things. But as a stepfather, all of a sudden, my stepfather's things have really grown up. Like I didn't know how hard it was to be a stepdad until I was a stepdad. And now I really appreciate my stepdad, probably more than I appreciate my father, and I mean, honestly, I'm going through a season right now where I'm like, man, my dad wasn't that great a dad. He was a great dreamer. But like my stepdad was a solid dad, and so like those legacies change over time, and that's okay. And I think I'm getting ready to hit a season of my stepfather's things, and that's cool. I mean, that's just where you are, and that's how we celebrate, and that's how we create legacies. And I think it's okay. Shouldn't be stagnant and perfect.
You want to share, Matt, maybe a couple of really fun stories from families you've worked with, some of the legacy items that you've tried to help them either uncover or find, or even some of those stories. I think a lot of times people think like, oh, it's got to be perfect, what you and Ellen were saying, or it's got to be some really big monumental thing that is my legacy, where sometimes we've
Yeah,
heard from you often
I'll
small
tell
stuff.
one. There's a TV show coming out. I guess I could talk about it now. I don't know. I've got a new TV show, and I guess I'm gonna. Who cares? So you guys get a sneak preview here. I have a new TV show coming out on Discovery in February, and it's called Filthy Fortunes, and it's basically um, the Discovery wanted me to make a TV show about finding really cool items in hoarded houses and really extreme houses, which is what we clean up every day. And we had this one family that it's probably $1 million marble collection. Marble. It's gotta be old glass marbles, and a lot of them are handmade. A lot of them are one of a kind, like really obscure, incredible glass artists. A lot of them are the old remnants found. I mean, believe it or not, the old remnants found off the floor, like in the production end of the production line in West Virginia. All the marbles are made in West Virginia, by the way, like all of them. And the remnants are the molten lava part that falls off at the end of the production run that falls down into the dirt floor, and then people would go and dig them up 100 years later. Well, this lady had an insane collection of those, and those things are really really valuable. And she had them labeled from like what plant and what year and what city, and so her collection was insane, right? And her collection was her legacy. And we cleaned this whole thing out. It's going to be on this TV show we're doing. It's actually on the first episode. You'll see how much we sold it for. The lady had passed away, and it was her grown children. They didn't have the passion for the marbles. They had the passion for their mom, right? And that was so her legacy was not actually the marbles. It was the collecting. I mean, they were like, we would go all around the world picking up marbles with our mom. And the stories they were talking about was like the ride in the wagon, like the station wagon, you know. And she had taken one of those old family trucksters from like Christmas Vacation. like the old wagon with the seat in the way back that goes the other way, and
Oh,
you can like,
wood and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
the wood panels, you can wave at all the kids in the back. And so like these families are telling me these stories. The vehicle, no pun intended, the vehicle was going to look for marble collections. But the legacy was the family and the time that they spent together every Saturday going hunting for these marbles. And they even told a story of how mom had bought this wagon and covered it with marbles, like hand glued marbles on this whole wagon. So they would drive up and down from Buffalo all the way down to Miami for decades to pick up all these marbles. Well, we get the collection, right? And they didn't even care what the value of the collection was. For them, it was they just missed their mom, and they just wanted to share their stories, right? And so they had unlimited stories of these marbles. And this is where it really gets to it. We sold the whole collection. We sold it all, like, because they didn't want it. They each grabbed a couple marbles that were good. We sold it. Lots of commas in this number. I'll tell you that. I can't spoil that for the show. But they were ready to really do something special with that money. It wasn't for themselves. They want to do something special for the outside world. And then this always happens in a clean out. In the last minute, something special. You find something special, right? And so we were cleaning out the top of a bookshelf, and I always check every extra corner. And so I'm cleaning out the top of the bookshelf in the marble room. And I found a little envelope like this big. And I opened it up, and it wasn't the mother's handwriting. It was some other man's cryptic handwriting. And then I found a post-it note with the mom's handwriting on it, and I could read the note of what it was. And so what I had found was her first marble. And it was a marble that the grandfather had brought her and given to her. And so I was able to present this. I handed the family a check, a very big check. And then I was like, oh, by the way, guys, I also found there's one marble we didn't sell. And I hand it to the daughter. And the daughter just starts bawling. And she goes, we've been looking for this marble for 10 years. We thought it was lost. Again, it wasn't about the monetary value. The story was this was the first marble that got her excited, that it started the whole thing, right? And their whole childhood was them going around the world picking up marbles. And that's the great memory of their mom. But this was the marble that started it, right? And so for me, that legacy was that one marble. We probably sold close to 1 million marbles. And if not 750,000, we couldn't count them. There's so many. And we kept one. We happened to find the right one. But to me, what I love about that story is that the legacy is it's not even the item. It's not the marbles. It's what they did as a family. That's the legacy. And now this family still they all have other collections, but they collect like their mom did. And I just think that is so, so cool. And that's how they remember their mom, and that's how they celebrate her. And her mom will live on, especially now that we're putting her mom's story on TV. Her mom will live on forever, right? And her crazy spirit will live on forever. And to me, that's what a legacy is. And I think that's why I do everything I do, because I tell enough stories about my dad where people feel like they know my dad. And my dad's been gone for 25 years. And but he lives on forever. Like, I love it. And the Heather and Ellen have seen me speak a lot. I had a lady a couple of years ago come up to me in middle of nowhere, Colorado. And this lady, she goes, are you Ed Paxton's son? I said, I am. What gave it away? And she goes, you prance across the stage like your father did. And and I loved it, right? It made me so happy. And I just died laughing. And apparently I do. A lot of his friends have told me that. And I just love it. And again, it's legacy. It's how do you be remembered? How do you live? How do you take that on to that next generation? But for me, I do it through storytelling, right? Not everybody does. Some people just put up an item and say, well, this is my dad's, right? But I think it's how much you're willing to share. And if you guys can't tell, I start with whatever I remember, and then I go right to the emotion. And because I think the emotion is what brings us more details. Some of you just want the details, man. Like, if you want the details, then Artifacts is the best damn thing you will ever use, because it gives you all the space for the details. For me, I just hit the record button and I tell a story. It's just easier for me that way. But it allows me to kind of hold all my stories and all my legacies together. For me, man, I want to be remembered when I'm gone. Like I said this the other day in a class, I said, we were artifacting for somebody, and I said, guys, this isn't for you. This is actually for your grandkids that haven't been born yet. Like they're the ones that are going to read these stories and listen to these stories and watch these videos. And it was like the room, everyone's just like, oh my God, you're right. It's not just about me. It's also about the next generation that will never even meet me.
And the
You know?
beauty is you can create these bite-sized memories, right? For our ever shrinking attention spans in this
Yep.
world.
Oh yeah.
And the bite-sized memories have this ability to live on and we can expand on them, like because we're sharing them now. People can ask us questions. And so Matt, you kind of set the stage beautifully for how you define legacy. So why don't we talk about a couple of your legacy list items that you've artifacted?
All right. There's
You want
one,
to start
pull the painting up for me, if you would.
with the painting? Yeah.
Yeah.
Heather's going to pop that in the chat, or I've got it.
Okay. So this is actually one of my legacy list items, y'all. This is one of my dad's paintings. I'm going to throw everybody into this. This is my dad's painting. He painted it in 1969. He was in college. It was the year he met my mom, which is crazy. Um, this is a painting of my grandparents' farm in Oklahoma. And that was the carriage, the carriage that they had. And my dad would ride, they were farmers, they were wheat farmers and tobacco farmers and cotton and middle and, curved earth, Oklahoma. I mean, you can see a storm a day away, right? Just flat, flat, flat. And this is where my dad would spend all his time. And my dad was a dreamer and he would sit in that. And my grandpa was a postmaster and they would sit in that little carriage. And I guess the rumor is that my grandfather, that's where he became, they say he delivered the mail in that thing. I don't think it's true, by the way. I don't think it's true. I think it's a culmination of a couple different stories that got crunched together. I think there's parts of the truth in all these. But the fact is, my dad painted this, and the man in that carriage is a man named Temple Paxton, which is my great grandfather. And also, the man that my youngest son, was named after. My youngest son is named Temple Paxton. And so the other day, I got to show Temple Paxton a painting of Temple Paxton by Ed Paxton, okay? Owned by Matt Paxton. Okay, a lot of Paxtons here. This sits in our office. I love this painting because my dad did it, and I can hear my dad telling the story right now. And by the way, my son Temple Paxton never met Ed Paxton or Temple Paxton, but he's got a memory because of this painting. And by the way, my son is just like those men. He's just a dreamer. He just sits there. He'll sit there and dream all day, like his father, right? But to me, that legacy gets passed down. And for me, the most important part is you got to tell the stories. You got to tell the stories. One reason we use artifacts so much. But with it's really important to you as if you're here tonight on the class, like make sure you tell whatever you remember. Doesn't matter how much. Um, Again, I just told that story. I don't know how much of it's even true. It's all facts to me, but I don't know. I don't think my great grandfather was a postmaster. My grandfather was, but this is clearly my great grandfather, right? And so again, I don't even think the facts have to be perfect, but just put down what you remember.
And
That's
Matt,
all.
this is a theme of ours at Artifacts that you've heard us talk about ad nauseum, but we tell people it's about family lore. Family lore is
Yes.
okay. We don't need to be genealogists finding every fact with multiple citations. The family lore is also pretty awesome. And
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about.
I will tell you, as a guy that's cleaned out thousands of houses, I'd say half of the lore is true. Usually, I mean, I always find I'll find like a table where someone's like, "Oh, my grandfather brought that over from England on the Mayflower," and you very quickly you're 200 years off on that story, or you're like, it says the room store, underneath, like it's clearly not that, but to that family, that's a fact, and it came over on the Mayflower, and my dad wanted this on his tombstone. He wanted it to say, "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story," which I thought was kind of funny. So I think we mean that by lure. If your grandfather has told you a story for 20 years, let it be the story. Don't fact check everything. My God. I mean, let it let it be. Let the story live for what it is. Because you love the person for them telling the stories, not for the perfection and the accuracy of the story. You love the person that spent time with you and made you feel a certain way. That's the part of the legacy that I want you to remember. How did they make you feel? Why did it matter? What made you feel special about it? What did it feel like? What did it smell like? Like that's the stuff I really get into. And this painting for me reminds me my dad taught me to dream and like go really big. I mean, really big. And it started in this field. And so that's why I love this painting. And I try to teach that to my kids every day. And what I love, I say this about artifacts. Uh, my kids are going to have me telling this story. If you click on that, you don't have to click it now, but you see that audio file right there. It's here forever in my voice, right?
Is it?
When I'm gone, my kids will hear me, my grandkids, hopefully that I meet, my great grandkids that I never meet, they'll hear me telling that story about their great 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 grandfather. That's crazy when you say it out loud like that. But they'll say it because I took the time to artifact tonight.
That's awesome, Matt. I love that story. And I love the connection with your family and your son. And just it's a whole, I think you're right. There's so many emotions involved when telling those family stories, especially when it comes to legacy items. The
Well,
second,
yeah,
oh,
you real quick, you kept it for a reason, y'all.
yeah.
So put that artifact the reason.
And that ties in perfectly, I think, to your next item you wanted to share. You kept it for a reason. So I'm going to pull up the poker tip and let you tell us that
Oh,
story
God.
and how
I
that's
don't know why I chose this. So for those that don't know me, I've had a great career on TV, but before my TV career and before my time helping families, and before my dad died when I was 24, and this chip is from when I was 23. I was living in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. I was gambling full time. I owed a bookie $40,000. I wish the story wasn't true, y'all. I owed a bookie $40,000 and he broke my nose and because I couldn't pay him. That's why my nose goes to the left. And I looked at everything, every option on the table to come up with 40 grand in a weekend. And let me assure you, when you make 30 grand a year and you need to make 40 grand in, by Friday, there's not a lot of legal or good options on the table. And so at one point I had $10 left in my name. So I went to a blackjack table and I was like, all right, I'm gonna start. I'm either gonna be broke or I'm gonna, build this money back up. So I put $10 down on the table and I lost. And so I left the casino and I was like, okay, I got to either rob a bank or I got to do something illegal. And it was about a 3 mile walk up a mountain and I didn't have enough money for a cab fare. And so I started to walk up the mountain and I walked past the cab stand. This is 1999, y'all. So it didn't, this is before like cell phones or anything. I think there were cell phones, but I couldn't afford one. And long story short, I walked past the cab stand and the guy was like, "Get in," and I was like, "I don't have any money, man. Like I'm broke." And he goes, I'll take you home. Just get in." So he takes me home. And it's like 6 a.m. Been gambling all night. I'm dead broke. I got to find how to get home to run. I couldn't even afford to run away. That's how broke I was. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was like, I better just go to bed first. So I went to go to bed and I put my hands in my pockets and I found this chip. And so I did have more money. I had $5, but I took that as a sign that God was saying, go home. And so for me, at the end of the day, that was the last $5 I had. And that was the last day I gambled. Never gambled again. Um, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so you could argue every day is a gamble, but uh, I never gambled again. And I keep this chip just as a reminder to stay clean and and also a reminder that you can get out of nothing. And so for about an hour, I thought I was broke. And then I've always had $5. So I love this chip. It's not a positive story, y'all. It's not a positive legacy, but it's a real legacy for me. And I just started to share it with my kids, like just started to share it with the older boys. And happy to say they don't they're not interested in gambling. And ironically, I was in Vegas this weekend, and I was there. It was funny. I was there with my wife, and I walked by 100 tables, and it didn't. I could care less, you know. And it was really really special. And so anyway, that's my other legacy. And I don't, all legacies they're not all great, but they're still part of who you are. And so I keep that next. I want my kids to know the truth. and I don't know. I look at that chip and it makes me proud. It makes me smile. I don't know why. I mean, the guy beat the living crap out of me, and it was a pretty low point. And my dad was a drunk. Like, I'll be really blunt. And when I told him that story, he's just like, dude, what's wrong with you? Like, what? I mean, a guy that shouldn't judge anyone was like judging me. And that was for me my low point. It's like, okay, well, if an alcoholic's going to pick on me, I should probably stop what I'm doing and get my shit together. And so that was my turning point. So that little chip is my turning point. And I take it anywhere really, really important with me. Stays in my pocket. So like when I got married, I wore it. When I had a kid, it was in my pocket. I mean, whenever something really important happens, I bring that as a reminder that if I can beat that, I can do anything.
Love that story, Matt. And I think I know that you're not going to you're on a time budget with us. But I wanted to turn to a question from the audience because it actually fits into why you got so excited about artifacts after doing this work for decades and knowing how telling the story can help people let go of the items. I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I tell everybody, if you've seen my TV show, it's called Legacy List. And the legacy list is just what are the top 5 items that matter the most to your family. Right. And so I always have my families come in. We give them artifacts that, hey, try this out, use it, and give us your top 5 items. And then we record the stories. What we found is if people share the stories, it's easier for them to let go of the items. And I've got about a 3-year run on it now to prove it. Right. And what happens is, they're celebrating the people that mattered most. They're prioritizing the stories. They're prioritizing by saying, what's my legacy going to be about this person or this person or this person? And the more you celebrate that legacy, the more you spend the time celebrating the people that matter. And what you find out is, like, if I've told 8 stories about my dad, I don't need my dad's massive collection of National Geographics in the garage. I don't need every screw that he'd never used. I don't need every nail. I don't need every bucket of, used t-shirts that he never used and he tore them up to be rags. I don't need all of his old paints. I don't need any of that stuff because I took the proper time to celebrate him and tell the stories that mattered. And so what I've really found out is that if you really spend the time at the beginning of the decluttering process, artifacting properly and telling and creating your legacy stories, if you do that, the back end of the cleanup goes a lot faster because you're just not holding on to things that don't matter because you prioritize what mattered at the beginning.
That's great advice, Matt. Thank you so much.
Did someone record that? That came out better than I thought it would. So somebody send
We
me
are
that.
recording.
Yes.
We are on that for you.
For better and worse.
Oh,
We've got
can I
another.
answer a question and I will leave after this? Can I answer the
Yeah,
one
of course.
that Melissa just asked?
Yes.
Okay. I get this question all the time, Melissa. What do I do if someone is at the end of the line? They don't have children, they don't have grandchildren. And really what you're saying there is that you don't think anyone cares about your stories. And that's what we hear all the time. I'm very proud to tell you a lot of the communities I go to now are having legacy nights where people go up and they bring an item. um I can't tell, and I've started hosting some of these, and it's pretty funny. Like, it's basically adult show and tell, and they show up and they have an item. You have to put a 3-minute time limit on the storytelling because otherwise it'll go for 30 minutes. But I'll argue you'll find out that strangers want to hear your stories more than your kids do. My kids have heard every story I could tell you tonight. They're done with it. They're over it. They're annoyed. They've heard it a million times. They could tell it themselves, and I like that because that means I'm doing it right. But I'm telling you, other people want to hear your stories. The thing I say the best is if anyone ever says to you, hey, is there anything I can do for you? You hear that in any caretaking situation or grieving situation. So, is there anything I can do for you? Just let me know. And what I want you to say in return is, yeah, I want you to sit down and listen to me tell 5 stories. Now, if someone asked you to do that, you would do it. You'd do it all day long. But nobody wants to be the one to ask someone to come do it. And I'm just telling you, people would say yes, they would love it. So those of you that are sitting here tonight thinking, well, I don't have anybody that cares. I promise you, there are a lot of people out there that want to hear your stories. You just have to ask them. And I've seen a couple of the communities now where someone just says, hey, I got a bottle of wine. Come over. We're going to go through some pictures and tell stories. And it's a great way to make new friends. Yeah. There you go. Diane. Oh, Fishman. Hey, Yeah, Diane Fishman, she said, my wife and I, Zoe, we taught a class a couple months ago, and probably half the people had no children in that class. I was surprised how many there were. And the number one learning lesson that Zoe and I had on that class was we needed to create an online community for people to be able to do that, a Facebook community. And so we did. And so believe it or not, there's people out there that want to hear your stories. You just don't know them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And what I didn't think creating legacies and storytelling and artifacting would do is it actually gave me a new community of people. And that's been the biggest surprise for me this year, 2024. I love it.
You know,
But you have to get out of your comfort zone and ask people if they want to come listen to your stories. And that's weird. But I promise you, if you do it, you will be very pleased because somebody will say yes. It's the advice my dad used to give me on dating. Somebody will eventually say yes. So you just got to put yourself out there. So I guess for you guys, same thing. Ellen, you don't like that one? That's a good one.
that's a good one. Just keep going. No, Matt, I was going to say too, I tend to agree based on, the 3 years of Artifacts. People do want to hear the stories. It's why people share Artifacts publicly. They're fun to read. And even when we were first starting out, people are like, I didn't think I'd get it. And now I'm like always looking for new stories because it's fun to experience something else from someone's point of view.
I'm a very private person, ironically. You guys are more private than I am. Ellen and Heather are. But every artifact I make, I let it be shared with everybody because I get shockingly cool comments back from people. This is my dad's ring. You have to read my artifact. You have to go on Artifacts to read this story or hear it. But people come up to me now and like when I'm doing a speech, they're like, oh, is that your dad's ring? And they want to see it. Total strangers want to see my dad's ring. And that makes me really proud. Really proud.
His story lives on. Your story lives on.
Yes, my dad lives on forever. Forever. And he would love it. Let me assure you, my dad would love it.
Well, and I think that a lot of the artifacts that we're seeing too, it might be your personal history, but it becomes a part of the community history and beyond, right? You're one person, but you're attached to a community.
Yep.
And 2 weeks ago, I was with a woman here in Austin, Texas, and Melissa, she's just like you're saying, she has no spouse, no children, and she has a house full of collections. And she's like, what? No one's gonna care. And she could make a coffee table book tomorrow and I'd read it because she knows all the artists that all the pieces came from, and she has, it's made for TV, Matt. She has docents that bring people through her home. It's amazing. But what also I think helps people like her, why should I tell the stories? And some people's incentives are different. She wants to tell the stories because she wants the stories to go with the pieces when she's no longer here. And she wants the pieces to go to philanthropies that she supports. And I think that's amazing. And so her stories are going to be a part of her giving journey. And that's what is motivating her. And I think it's kind of cool.
Martha Stewart's first book, she was 55, y'all. She didn't document anything until she was 55.
55?
She started telling stories at 55.
Impressive.
I think it worked out. Yeah. And don't fact check me. Maybe it was 45. But my point is, she was older than you think. And it took her a while to sit down and do it. And when she did it, it worked out well for her. And the other version of that story is Rodney Dangerfield did not tell a joke till he was 60. He did not tell a joke on stage till he was 60. His first acting gig was 65. Right? And to me, that's just you gotta start. You gotta put one thing down. If you artifact one item and make it public, someone's gonna find you and they're gonna say, "Oh, that's interesting," and you're not even gonna believe them. But I promise you, they'll be like, "That's interesting," and then you start telling more and more and more. And if you guys can't tell, I love it. I'm a huge proponent of it, and you will enjoy it. You just got to get past that uncomfortableness first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. We know that you've got to jump. You've got a tight schedule tonight. Folks, we're going to sit on and show you how to actually create these artifacts and keep answering the questions we've got. But first, a very big thank you to Matt. We really appreciate your time and your tips on all things legacy.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
All right, folks, we're going to keep going. We've got a couple of questions that we had come in, and then we're also going to show you the legacy checklist. This is one that Matt will use with the families he's working with as he's going through kind of what items to prompt those memories, to prompt those stories. And then we're going to show you how to go step by step and make some of your own artifacts so you can get started preserving the stories and sharing them with family and friends. So I wanted to quickly jump over. We had a couple of questions come in before we keep going. We had a question from Diane. If you are still grieving, what do you recommend? Do people say I will expand on this item later with just a short note on the meaning? Diane, that's a great question. We actually did a whole session last year called Grief During the Holidays. And the purpose of this was to let people know it's okay. When you're in the middle of grief, sometimes you can't get the whole story out. Or if you're in the middle of downsizing an estate after losing a loved one, sometimes it's too tough to artifact every single item. But to start somewhere. So if it is a short story, if it's a short note, if it's whatever is natural to you, maybe it's even recording a short video or audio, that's a great place to start. And as Ellen noted earlier this evening, you can go back and edit anytime. So as you process the grief and process the emotions, you can add to the story. Maybe you have siblings who are helping you, or you have friends or other families. You can also, with artifacts, ask them to contribute to the story so it's not all on your shoulders. I know in my case, after my mother passed and I inherited 6,000 square feet of stuff, it was really tough going through that stuff. And I was overwhelmed and I didn't know where to start. And although my mother had an estate plan, she left all the stuff to my brothers and me. And my brothers, being boys, no offense, said, good luck with that. And for me, it was a really tough time. So this is before Artifacts. This is why we started Artifacts. But back then I would keep a little notebook of the things I wanted to make sure I would remember to tell my daughter the stories of one day, the things that I wanted to keep. And now that we have Artifacts, I've artifacted those items. And I've even asked my brothers, I've shared it with them and say, hey, please add your memories of mom. Because I think another important piece of like legacy is, to Matt's point, it's the stories and the memories we leave behind. And my memory of my mother is just one memory. My brothers have very different memories. So when we add them all together, we end up creating these beautiful pieces that are a legacy to our mom. It's a very long way, I think, of answering the question of, if you are dealing with grief, it's okay to take it step by step. You don't have to be perfect or do it all at once. Take it bit by bit. And over time, I think the grieving process turns into a remembering and honoring process. We've got another question as well that came into chat. I'm trying to go back and quickly find it. Is about preserving the items. Ellen, if you want to jump in on this one, how do you protect and preserve some items? I have a glass bride bowl from my great-grandmother. She brought over from Germany.
So I'm like, oh, I can just imagine it. And I can't wait to see it artifacted, to be honest. But I think it depends, because I'm a big person that likes to display the things that I really enjoy. And so, and I don't necessarily mean in a traditional cabinet. If it was me and I wanted it out but protected, I would consider one of those clear glass boxes. Because it's a glass item, I'm not worried about putting it in plastic. So I could actually have it out and enjoy it. Now, if you're, I have seen some really cool examples of this. So no one yell at me. If you're in an earthquake zone, don't do this. But they're also a really great wall brackets. And at my cousin's house, she actually has old pieces from her grandmother's collection, and they're on her wall in a metal mount, and so they're artfully decorating the wall, and I think that's kind of cool too. I think it just depends on how comfortable you are having it exposed. So those would be my two pieces of advice. And the glass, the clear plastic boxes, you can get them at place. I think Archival Methods and Gaylord's both have them, but if not, I have definitely seen them at the Container Store, and other places. Even maybe like a Hobby Lobby would have something like that.
Mm-hmm. And we've also seen some folks who they'll artifact the item to ensure that it's there for insurance purposes. If you have a valuable item, ensure that it is documented, because you never know what happens. But then they may take a photo and frame the photo and have that displayed on the wall, while maybe the glass bowl or the other breakable item is safely stored somewhere where it's not going to be prone to breakage or dropping or whatever it happens to be. So there's a lot of really creative ways we've seen people go about highlighting and showcasing the items they love while still protecting them. So I think that's a great question, Diane. All right, I think that took care of the questions we have. Feel free to keep popping questions in the chat. We're going to keep going through them as we get them. We do want to move into the interactive portion of this and let you all follow along at home if you're curious how on earth we make those artifacts like Matt showed us. So I first want to quickly share the checklist. I'll go back to sharing my screen. I probably should have done that first if we're clicking over there. Let me quickly share my screen. Here we go. All right. This is our legacy checklist. And these are some great, if you're curious if you want to get started, you're not sure where to start, we provide these checklists as ways to really kind of get you thinking of, well, what stories do I want to tell? What memories do I want to leave behind? And you can access these checklists. We have a legacy one, but dozens of others on our website. But this is the checklist we're using for tonight's series, some of the items we're going to be featuring and highlighting. Ellen popped the link into chat earlier, and we'll also pop the link in the chat again, just in case you need to access it. But it's a really great, handy tool. Also, with the holidays coming up, this is a really, we had some folks last year let us know that they printed off this checklist, as well as some of the old photos checklists, and they gave their family homework ahead of Thanksgiving and asked each family member to bring an item from the checklist and then share the stories around the Thanksgiving table. And that way you're not just talking about, hey, how's the weather? Or how's school going? Or trying to get your teenage daughter to tell you what's new in her life. You have a fun activity where you're all, again, telling those stories and sharing those memories. So that's our checklist. I want to pop over now. We saw a bunch of Matt's artifacts. I want to highlight, I've cheated. I've logged into my artifacts account. I've gone to my favorites. I wanted to highlight some of my artifacts that if something happened to me tomorrow, I'd want my daughter to know the story behind. Some of them are actual items she may inherit one day, such as jewelry or a vintage Christmas ornament that my mother bought for me when I was born, and now my daughter will one day have. Other things are like recipes, things that my mother taught me to make, but I've now taught my daughter how to make. Chocolate chip cookies, apple pie, photo of my mother's cookbooks. This is one of my favorite. As people ask, most prized possessions. My answer unequivocally are my mother's cookbooks and my absolutely destroyed, totally useless pair of hiking boots, which I'll show you that artifact in a moment. But my mother's cookbooks. My daughter never really got to know my mother. She passed away when she was so young. But I've kept her cookbooks, her handwriting, her doodles, her messages, her notes. And my daughter knows my mother's love language was cooking. And I'm very proud that my mother taught me how to cook. And I'm able to pass on those traditions as part of my mother's legacy. Her story is everything in those cookbooks. I'm going to quickly pop back over to my favorites and show you the other thing people ask. What are your favorites or what are your legacy? For me, the other piece is my hiking boots. These boots have traveled the world. They tell my story, the literal ups and downs. My daughter may never keep these boots one day. It's probably a lot to ask of her when I'm gone, but she'll have the artifact, the story, and my memories of why these boots mean so much to me. So this is a very quick way to show sometimes what we think of as legacy. It's not a name on the building. It's not a big donation somewhere, but they're the small moments, the stories, like Matt said, that really remind people who we are and what we did, where we went, what we loved, little pieces of us. So these are just some examples of, for me, what my legacy would be. I want to pop over now and let's show people how to actually make these artifacts.
So while you're popping over, I just want to answer a question in chat from Melissa about how long audio and video can be when you're saving a recording into an artifact. And the use case is a collection of antique music boxes, which is really fascinating. So antique music boxes, it depends how many notes were in the music box on how long the song could possibly be. I did a quick Google. The average is between 40 seconds and 2 minutes before it will keep cycling over and or you have to recrank it. So if it's 40-second audio recording, that's not going to be a problem. It depends what you can fit in an artifact, what you're recording at, right? So if I set my phone to record the highest quality possible, I'm going to get a smaller file. If I use the default, I could have 3, 4, or 5 minutes even of an audio. So most likely, Melissa, you'll be able to record the complete audio and include those in the artifact. And I think that's a pretty cool opportunity with those antique music boxes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellen. And great question, Melissa. All right, folks. I know we're coming close on time, so I do want to be able to quickly show you how do you make these artifacts, adding the audio and video that Ellen was just describing as well. What I've done is I've logged into my Artifacts account. And you can do this. I'm using my laptop right now for ease of use. You can also do everything I'm about to show you on our app. We do have an Android and iOS app. The beauty of the app is, like Matt was saying, you can talk to text using the app. And you can record video and audio right in the app as well. So there are some features you can do on the app that we don't have enabled on desktop. But that said, let's jump right in. And feel free to follow along at home as well if you're creating an artifact with us tonight. So I clicked the plus button and I went to new artifact. I'm now here. This is where I can upload. I've got the ability to upload up to 5 different media files, so photo, video, and audio. I can drag and drop the files, or I can upload from my device. I've also can upload from some other really common areas like Google, Dropbox, Chrome, you name it. Over here, when you make your artifact, you always start in quick form. And that's really to help you get the details really simple upfront without a whole lot of hassle. If you want to go in and edit, we always edit from full form, which has a lot more fields for you to use. You can always toggle between the two though and start in full form if you prefer, but the default is quick form. So now that I'm in quick form, you can quickly name your artifact. You can choose what is it? What is the category? And here you don't have to have just one category. You can choose multiple categories. Say if you're artifacting a piece of art that your child drew for you, it could be kids art. And also it could be prints and drawings. Perfect. There we go. Now is a description or story. And this goes back to, I think, some of the questions that were asked earlier, but also some of Matt's advice. You can start really small here. It could be 5 words. If my mother gave me this, end of story. You could write 5 paragraphs. You could go back and add to it over time so that as you think of new details or new memories, or in Ellen's case from 3 years ago, maybe your mood or emotion about the item has changed. You want to add to it or change it. That's great. Go back and edit. And if you happen to be stuck on what to write, click the little light bulb here. We've got some great questions to start. This also works really well if you happen to be a professional who's helping people artifact, helping clients. If you're a photo manager or move manager, or professional organizer, this is a great way to kind of get clients thinking, what do I want to put here? If you're artifacting with your family, fabulous. Ask grandma these questions. Like Matt said, memories beget more memories. And it's amazing when you start asking those simple questions, what people will remember and the stories they'll tell. So that's the story description field. Country of origin, you can easily just pick US or unknown, or if you're a world traveler, we've got all the different countries listed below for ease of use. In the future, I think this is really important when we're talking about legacy items here. If you are artifacting an item that you want to be passed down to the next generation, or you want to be donated, say, to a historical society, or to a local museum, or to a charity, or you want to let your family know, hey, this is valuable, but it's okay that you sell it. It has no special meaning to me. That's great. So in the future, it's not a required field, but you have the ability to choose, what do you want to happen to this item next? Sell, donate, bequeath, keep in the family as you wish, or one of my favorites, too late. I've already parted with this. But here's the memory, which I wish we my mother had artifacts and had used artifacts, because the amount of time I spent looking for items I thought she had, she didn't actually have anymore. But there was no way of knowing that. So in the future, it's a great way to give your family a roadmap for what happens next to that artifact. You can also add documentation. So we didn't get into this, but if you're artifacting artwork or jewelry or other items that have appraisals or warranties or receipts, it's a great way to attach the documentation to the artifact. So you and your family knows this goes with this. It saves a lot of hassle and heartache down the road. And then last but not least, custom tags. You can use any of our most commonly used tags. You can also create your own custom tags. I have a tag that I use for my mother's estate. It's a mom's estate. I also have mom's recipes. I mentioned earlier, cooking was her love language. I have an entire tag just for her recipes, which lets me easily sort and search and find them. So I have over 300 artifacts myself. So once you've done all that, you can quickly click save. You're good to go. You have a new artifact. By default, all artifacts are private. If you want to make it public, like Matt says, he makes all of his artifacts public, you can toggle the switch and the artifact becomes public. It's really simple to do. I now want to cancel out of here and quickly show you how to share artifacts. It's, I think, a great part of when you're artifacting to tell your story, to preserve those memories, and using that legacy checklist. It's really fun when you get to share. I'm going to do a silly one here. A while back, I wrote an article titled, "Can Chocolate Chip Cookies Be My Legacy?" And it's a really funny story. It involves my daughter and a cross-country team and dozens of chocolate chip cookies. But here's an artifact I did make with the recipe. Originally, it was my mother's recipe. You can see the old Betty Crocker cookbook with her notes and her additions. See the finished product. There's the cookies. All right. So I made the artifact. I've got all the details here below. Good to go. I now want to share the artifact. I can click here and share. Because this is public, I can post it to, say, as part of a Facebook group. I can post it to Facebook. I could post it into other social channels. If I want to share with a person, I can type in their email, or I could pick, if they're already an Artifacts member, I can pick Ellen and share with Ellen. I can add a short note. Enjoy. Click share. Done. We're good to go. Another great feature with artifacts is that we can share with different groups and lists. Yeah. And Ellen just got the artifact. She can now make chocolate chip cookies this weekend. So if you are sharing with a large family, I want to quickly highlight, we do have sharing lists and circles. So for me, I can share with my entire family, or I can share with all my daughter's friends and kind of cheerleaders in her corner. But rather than typing out, dozens of email addresses or dozens of screen names, I can click the list that I made for my family, click share, I'm good to go. They now all have the recipe without me having to type and retype. This is a very, very quick demo. I know we had a lot of time spent talking with Matt tonight. Happy to answer any questions. And Ellen, if there are some, please feel free to jump in. But that is how
we only have one, Heather, which is, what is my legacy list? And I'm like, oh, I'm in so much trouble. I don't know if I should share my screen or not, but I will. And I will shore up something that Heather said, because it's really, really important. Let me see if I can find the right screen. All right, share. Okay, so I will go to my pinned favorites. I was trying to figure out my legacy list before we started tonight. And here's my observation that I want to share with you all. Ultimately, my legacy list is about the spirit of who I am as a person, is what I've determined unifies all these artifacts. Ice skating in Russia, it's about going outside your comfort zone and having fun and being a kid at any age. And I've collected rocks my whole life. They are all over my home from all the places I've traveled. And my daughter thinks I'm crazy, and I think it's funny. but this Yoga Joe, I like to decorate my home with unexpected things that just, like you look in a planter and the planter has like little eyeballs on it. Like you just never know what you're going to find. And outside the comfort zone, running a race and placing, my friend's wedding and those kinds of things. But I do have some like more traditional items as well, including Christmas stockings. The red one my mother made, and then the green one that's in the hallway at my house. The green one I made to look like my mom's when I was dating my husband when we were in college. So I really love those. And this ring, it's not about the ring per se that I bought my daughter when I was in Brazil for work, but it's about the whole story of going to Brazil. And she was little, and I felt guilty leaving her for so long as a working mom. And so there's a lot tied to it. And someday she'll inherit this. And I've put that in the details that, I want to bequeath this to my daughter. And I did include the warranty in the appraisal. So she has that information if she's like, I don't want this ring, or I don't know, if she loses it and has to file an insurance claim. So, but I think that my theme with where I got with my legacy list is it's about the spirit of who I am, and some really sentimental touches like this music box from my parents and their first Christmas together, and making silly ornaments and buying precious ones with my daughter. So it's about who I am, much more than anything valuable for the most part. So I hope that answers that question. It's rather embarrassing when I realized how silly my artifacts are.
But that's, I think, the beauty of that, though, is that artifacts can be silly. They tell the story of you. And I think tying it all back to what Matt was saying earlier, legacy it's our stories, it's our memories, it's what we want others to remember us by. And I think that's a really important piece here, is that no matter how big or how small, the stories matter. And it doesn't, if you have, 10 family members or 10 friends, or it doesn't matter how many, but having someone being able to tell your story and laugh with you and share it with generations to come, that's the important piece of legacy right there. So with that, I do know that we are up on time. We want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's Evenings with Artifacts.
Well, we have a surprise. Wait, we forgot the surprise. So all of you, I think you'll enjoy this. Heather, we have a new checklist. And we actually have a few new checklists coming out, but there's a new checklist that we will be sending directly to you all, hot off the presses tomorrow as a thank you for attending. You're the first ones who will see it. And I think that you'll open it and you'll think about our discussion tonight and you'll go, ah. So that's our hope. We hope you really enjoy it and all the other new ones that are coming up.
You can catch any of our old episodes on our YouTube channel, and also this one we posted tomorrow if you want to rewatch it, rewatch what Matt was saying about legacy and his stories and how he views it. We thank you all for joining us. We hope you all have a fabulous night and a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much, and happy artifacting.